What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and we're back for another episode of the first-person shooter tutorial series. Specifically, in today's episode, we are going to be going over a press any key screen or menu, so that when we come into our game, we have the title of the game, and then we have to press an input to proceed further. This is good for a few reasons. Sometimes we wait for user input to validate certain things, like if they have permissions to play online, if it's a legal or licensed version of the game, if they have an account. And then after that, once we validate everything, we can bring them to the main menu. It's also just a staple at this point. Usually games will have this press any key screen. It could be completely silent. It might just be the font or the logo. Then when you press an input, it plays a sound effect or starts playing music. So there is a design portion of this as well that is very important. And then eventually we'll go to our main menu after pressing that input, and we can go to the game from there just like we already have been doing in this series. I can't show you the menu yet because we're going to make it together in this episode. But before we hop into it, if you want to get caught up in the series and check out everything else we've done, so you can see our mini-map behavior, our enemy health bars, and a lot of our projectile logic, then I recommend you check out the entire playlist of the first-person shooter tutorial series, which I'll link you right here in the top right corner. Alternatively, if you don't care about the entire series and making a first-person shooter, but you still care about the press any key screen, I do recommend that you watch the main menu episode in this series so that you have a menu to go to, because we are going to be tying some of the logic together. That way we have proper menu flow. So I'll go ahead and link that episode right here if you want to check it out and get caught up on that side of things. And with all that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. So this is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We're going to be doing everything in the blueprints and within the editor today, because we are going to be making a new widget and spawning it when the game starts, and we'll go from there. So first things first, I want to go to where my blueprints are, which is in first person, blueprints. Then in the widgets folder, we need to make a screen. I'm going to go actually one step further into menus, because they are split up between HUD elements and those types of widgets, and then menus. And here we can right click and go to user interface and select widget blueprint, or you can go to add, go to user interface, which is being cut off here. You can see the top of it, and then go to widget blueprint. Either of these ways will work, and this will work in UE4 or UE5. If you're in Unreal Engine 4, it will automatically make the widget for you at this point. If you're in UE5, it is going to make you pick the parent or the root widget for this widget. And you do have a few options that you can pick from, but typically user widget is good enough for what we need. And we haven't set up any custom root widgets yet in this series, so user widget will be fine. Then at this point, we can name it, and we're going to call it press any key menu. I often call it the press any key screen, whatever works as long as you know what it is, and then we'll go into the widget. Now when we're in here, since I'm in Unreal Engine 5, I'm not going to have anything except the root element for the widget itself. However, if you're in Unreal Engine 4, you're going to have a canvas panel by default. It's not required that you follow this exact setup. You can design it how you want, but to follow along with me, I am going to put a canvas panel, so you can go ahead and do that too if you don't have one already. If you're in Unreal Engine 4, you will have that canvas panel by default, so you don't need to add an extra one. But now we're basically working off of the same data, whether we're in UE4 or UE5. And at this point, we can start setting up our menu to look however we want it to look. So I like to typically put a background image here for our press any key screen. So I can drag an image into the canvas panel here, call it background image, and I don't need it to be a variable because I don't need to edit anything about it right now. If we do need to edit things about it, we can convert it to a variable. That's perfectly fine. Then we go to the anchor section here, and we want to make this full screen or full size. And this just means it will take up the entire parent element or parent widget here, and that is our canvas panel, so it's going to take up the entire thing. When you change the anchor, it tries to keep the current position of this element of our image on this widget. So you'll notice that it looks the same as it did, but now we have these huge offsets here. So if we set these offsets to 0, then you'll see it takes up the entire size of the canvas panel. And then at this point, I like to change the Z order to be -1, so it renders behind everything. So anything that's at Z order 0, which is the default, will render on top of this. That's what makes it the background image. Then we can change the brush to be the actual image that we want to use for our press any key screen. Right now I don't have one. We will be adding one later in the series as I get one. So if you have a finalized image, feel free to use it, or you can make one. I'm just going to change the color and opacity. So I'll change the RGB to be 0, 0, 0, or we could do 0.25, 0.25, 0.25 to give a gray background, and that will work for this. Then after that, we are going to want a text element or text widget on our canvas panel. This is going to be our title. This could also be part of your image. If you have a nice big image that has your title and whatever font you chose, of course that works. I'm going to make it in the engine here. I'm just going to call this title text. It does not need to be a variable. We can anchor it to the top center. And again, remember when we do that, it's going to try and keep the current position that we have. So we need to change our position X to be 0. Then it's going to put it slightly off center because it technically puts the origin, which is the top left of the text box, at the top center. And that is not the same thing as having our text centered. So a very simple solution to this is to change our alignment. This is changing the pivot point of the widget, so we can change the X to 0.5, and I like to change the Y to 0.5 as well. And then I'll typically give this text box an offset on the Y, or position Y. That way it appears on the menu, not outside of it. And we can change the text itself to be first person shooter tutorial series. Just call it first person shooter tutorial. That will work. Then we can go to our justification. I like to center this. You don't have to do that. You can just change the size of your widget and still make it work that way. But if we center this here, then it doesn't really matter what the size of this is. So we can increase the size of this text box. Say we make the size the entire width of the canvas panel, which you can find out what that is by clicking on the canvas panel and looking up here. It is technically 1921 by 1081. So if we go to our text and we can make this size X 1920, and we could make the size Y whatever we want, probably like 100. And that looks pretty good for now. So our text is centered. We're not done with it yet. Let's go down to the font settings right here under appearance. And we can open that up and change your font if you want. I like to change the size. We can try 48, might be big enough. You could also go to 72. That works, that looks pretty good. And I like to change my outline settings as well, typically 2 or 4 for the size, just to make it pop a little bit from the background. Here we go, we have our first person shooter tutorial. Okay, and we're good here. So now we have text that we are happy with. At this point, I want to have some text that says like press any input or press A or press enter or whatever, just indicating to the player that they need to do something here to proceed. So we can just add another text element to the canvas panel. And this one we can call press any key text. We can anchor this to the bottom center here and do the same thing that we did with the other one. So we want to set our offsets, our positions to 0. Change our alignment to 0.5 and 0.5. If you want, feel free to change your size X to be 1920. Just like we did with the title. You don't have to do this, but feel free to if you want. That way, when you center it in the justification, it will appear in the center. I would position it up so it appears within the canvas panel, not outside of it, and we can move it to the value we want. Let's say -100. That might be pretty good. And then for the size Y, we can make it 60. Then for the text, we can say press any key, ... Maybe 36. I'll throw on a 2 outline size. Let's try a 4. That's a little bit too much. I say 2 is good on that. And there we go. We have our text. And of course, change this to your liking. All of this is up to you. I'm just showing you what I'm doing. If you want to copy it, feel free. But feel free to play around with it to get a different effect as well. Now at this point, something I always like to do on this screen is add a little bit of movement so it's not a static menu. And to do that, we can make an animation for our press any key text here. And it's very simple to make animations on widgets. If you're in UE4, it's called Sequencer. If you're in UE5, it's called Animations. And we want to get to this tab to create them. So you can either go to Window up at the top and then go to Animations, or again, in Unreal Engine 4, it'd be Sequencer. Or you might have it docked in your layout down here, Sequencer Animation. Either way, you can also open it with Control, Shift, and Spacebar. You have a lot of options, but basically get to this menu one way or another. And then I like to dock it in the layout. That way I can see everything else. It's not just a pop-up here. And now we can create animations for this. So the first thing you need to do is press plus animation. And then we can call this whatever we want. I'm going to call it press any key fade. So this is going to be a fade effect for the press any key text. And actually I'm going to rename it to press any key text fade. That way we're very explicit about what we're doing. Now at this point we have our animation and we need to add a track to the animation. The tracks are what actually modify elements of this element or of this widget. So plus track, and we need to either find it in one of these sections here, like if we're adding an audio track, or we want to find it in all named widgets, which will show us the actual widgets that we added to this hierarchy here. So all named widgets, and we want press any key text. You can do either press any key text or press any key text on the canvas panel slot. And these are different because press any key text is an animation that will work on that specific widget no matter where it is. And the canvas panel slot, you're really modifying the elements of this widget on the canvas panel slot. So it could be a little bit different depending on if you move it or change things around in the canvas panel. I like to just do it on the widget itself for most cases because that is easier for the types of things that I had typically done, but again, up to you. Then at this point, once we have the actual widget on the track that we're going to be modifying, we can go plus track here one more time, which determines what we're changing about the widget. So you have a lot of different options here, and for this specifically, I like to make this a fade effect, which is basically just changing the visibility over a period of time. However, I typically do this with color and opacity because with visibility, you have a few different settings in there, like if it's hidden or collapsed. And it's not really the same as just changing the color to get the effect that I want. So with color and opacity, if you change the opacity, that's like changing the visibility to a specific value of a ratio between 0 and 1, or 0%, 100%. So if we go color and opacity, we add this here. Then we can open this up to see all the values in it, which is RGBA, red, green, blue, alpha. So we have the properties that we're going to be modifying, and now what we can do is scrub on our timeline. So we can move this thing around. These numbers are in seconds. So this is going to move when the animation plays. This is half of a second, 1 second, 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds, so on and so forth. And so say I want this animation to fade and I want it to take 1 second to completely fade out and then 1 second to completely fade in. We could do it that way. So if we go to 1 second on the timeline, we come back here to color and opacity, we can add a new key. Keys are basically specific frames or specific points on our timeline that we want things to happen. We want certain values to be met. So if we want the opacity to be at 0%, completely invisible, at 1 second, we could add a key at 1 second by pressing this little plus button here. You can do it for just the alpha, or you can do it for the entire thing. It doesn't really matter, but if you do it for just the alpha, you just have this one key, and the other values aren't really affected by it. You also notice it created these circles here for the starting point, which is 0 seconds, so I have a key for each of these, but then 1 second in, I have another key. Then I can go another second out, 2 seconds out, press plus on the alpha again to add another key here. Now at this point I can click on my keys to change values about it. So I've selected the 1 second mark and I can change the alpha to be 0, which is completely invisible. Now if I scrub on this timeline, you'll see it starts at 100% alpha, and over time that value gets changed to 0% alpha. And then if I leave this one alone, the value is 1.0, which means it will go from 100% alpha, or completely visible, to 0% alpha, or completely dark, and then 100% alpha again to completely visible. And now if we drag the scrubber back here and just play it, you see what the animation actually looks like. And then this would be on loop. So maybe that's too slow, or maybe it's too fast, or maybe that's not the effect you want. But that's how you can create animations for your widgets. I think this is pretty good. We might tweak it later to make it look a little bit nicer, but I'm pretty satisfied with that. So at this point, what we can do is go to the graph, go to event construct of the widget. This is what's going to happen when the widget is created. And we can drag our press any key text fade animation in. It is going to be a variable by default. I did not have to add this. We can get it. Then we can drag off of that animation and call play animation. And you have a few different options. Play animation is the one that gives you the options for everything, but you have to manually set them. Whereas you can also do like play animation forward, which requires much less work to set up, like play animation forward. So you'll see there's less things that you have to set, but I like to just call play animation a lot of the time so that I have the ability to change whatever I need. And then what I'm going to do is come in here. We're going to start at 0 time. That makes sense. That's our starting point. Number of loops to play, I'm going to set this to 0 because as the comment says, we set it to 0 to loop indefinitely. Play mode is forward. We can either do it forward, reverse, or ping pong. Ping pong will go to the front and then to the back, then to the front, to the back. If you do that, you don't need to do the 2 different keys that I set up. And playback speed of 1.0 is good. And restore state will move everything back on the widget back to where it was when the animation is done if it was moving things around or changing their values. It's not important for this. We don't need it, so I'm going to leave it unchecked. Now at this point, we can compile and save and our menu is ready to go. The next thing to do is to spawn this widget so that we can actually see it in the game. And my widgets right now for my main menu are spawned in the level blueprint. So when we enter the main menu level, we go into the level blueprint here. By the way, in UE4, you can get to this by going back to this screen. There'll be a drop down here that says blueprints. You can select that and then find open level blueprint. Then in that blueprint, we can go to event begin play and you'll see that we're creating the main menu widget and we're adding it to the viewport. We technically do a few other things in here for playing music and such, but that's not important for this specific moment. So what we care about right now is just creating the main menu widget. Instead of doing this, we want to create the press any key screen widget. So press any key menu and add it to viewport. And also to get this node, if you're doing this for the first time, you actually type create widget and then select your widget in here. This would be your press any key menu. Drag off this return value and add to viewport, which actually displays it in the player screen or in the viewport. Then we can compile and save and close out of this and go to our main menu level and play it, and you'll see that we load our press any key screen right here. However, I can't bypass this menu in any way. We haven't set up any logic to do that. So if I want to do that, I have to go back to my press any key menu, and we can either make an input action that is captured on here and proceeds to the next screen, or we can use the built-in any key keyboard event that exists so that when any input is pressed, we proceed to the next menu. It really doesn't matter which route we go here. It just depends on your game. So there's a very good chance that we will have a press any key input that we want to use anywhere, like we can bind actions to it. And if that's the case, we don't want to use the built-in one, or at least we don't have to. The thing is, having this one in the widget doesn't really harm anything because in the case of any key, you're not changing the binding. It's just if any input has been detected. So for the future of the series, I'll go ahead and add one anyway. So if we go edit, project settings, and go down to input, we can add an input action mapping in here. If you're using enhanced input, that can also work. The setup is a little bit different, but we haven't swapped over to that yet. And we just want to add an action mapping in here, and I will call this one any key, and we will set the binding to any key. This is not just keyboards. This will work for any input, so controllers as well. Then when we're in here, we can search for any key, and we'll have either our action event, which is the one that we set up, or the regular one that I was showing you earlier. I'm going to use my new one in this case just to make sure it's working. And when we press any key, we want to go from this menu to the main menu. So to do that, we can create widget, and on pressed of any key, we can create the main menu widget. We can add it to the viewport, add to viewport right here. And this will display it to the screen. Once we have the main menu displayed to the screen, we can safely remove the press any key screen, because we don't need both these menus open. So to do that, we can then simply drag off of add to viewport and call it remove from parent. That is going to remove this widget from the parent widget, which in the case of the press any key screen is the viewport. So it's going to remove it from the viewport and you won't be able to see it anymore. It's technically destroying it at that point because it's not being used anywhere. So that's all the logic we need for this menu. And then we can compile and save and come into our main menu. And you'll see here's our game. And when we press any input, including clicking on the screen, we go to our main menu. And then from there, we can enter our game. I hope this video helped you create a press any key screen and improve your menu flow for your game. If it did, please subscribe and consider joining the Patreon, YouTube membership, and Discord subscriptions to help out the channel greatly. I appreciate everyone who has, and I'm so happy that you guys are enjoying the series because it is a blast to work on, and it's fun to see what all you guys come up with. If you ran into any problems following this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. There is a link in the description, and I would be happy to help you out. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.